I love it when the Real Housewives of Potomac, Monique Samuels, shares this deep revelation about women who decide to get married at a young age.
We always say that like we have to show people how to love us, but I think the part that we miss is that we also have to love ourselves the way we deserve to be loved, for ourselves first. And I didn't do that. Very young, I didn't do that. I didn't even know that that was a thing until I started doing some healing on my own.
So Monique decides to go live the other day, and someone asked her what was the biggest lesson she learned after divorcing Chris Samuels, which is her ex-husband. She talked a lot about how she married young, how she didn't really know herself at the time, and that she didn't know that it was a thing to love herself first. And so we've heard Monique say on this season of The Real Housewives of Potomac that being around the group of ladies had actually extended the life of her marriage, because a lot of the things that was going on was not caused by the show. They were already there. But she explained to the ladies on The Real Housewives of Potomac, because she was fighting so much with them, it ended up pushing her and Chris closer together. And so it sounded like being on the show was a great distraction for the problems and the things that her and Chris were going through at the time. But once the show ended and once Monique, amped out on Candace Dillard, she was left to deal with some of the things that had kind of been pushed to the back burner while filming the show of The Real Housewives of Potomac. And so to go back to the question that someone asked, what did she learn after divorcing Chris? She actually said she learned a couple of things.
So one thing that I learned is that I would never again get into a relationship without first loving myself the way that I want someone to love me. I have to do that for me first. So a lot of times we get into a relationship and we expect the other person to love the parts of us that we struggle with, and then that can turn into control, that can turn into just like expectations that aren't being met.
But she puts an emphasis on you have to master the self-love part first. So from the research I did on Google, it says that Monique was 28 years old when she married Chris in 2012, and Chris was 34 at the time of their wedding. Another thing that I want to point out is that incident that happened between Monique and Candace. Monique said that it stemmed from her having just like some unhealed trauma. And after that whole incident, it led to her getting into therapy, which I guess is there where she began to realize that her response to what her and Candace was arguing about on the show, it was linked to some childhood trauma.
What did you learn from your divorce as of right now, but still learning? That's a great question. I learned many things from my divorce, mainly that when you get into a relationship and you haven't really dealt with your own inner childhood traumas, or if you've never really gotten to know yourself, you end up attracting the unhealed version of yourself.
And so before I wrap up this video, I really love where Monique gave this deep revelation about women who marry young, because at the beginning of any relationship, especially marrying young, you don't really know yourself, and having babies, being on a reality show, and marrying somebody will definitely change you. I also like the part where she talked about self-love.
So one thing that I learned is that I would never again get into a relationship without first loving myself the way that I want someone to love me. I have to do that for me first. So a lot of times we get into a relationship and we expect the other person to love the parts of us that we struggle with, and then that can turn into control, that can turn into just expectations that aren't being met. We always say that we have to show people how to love us, but I think the part that we miss is that we also have to love ourselves the way we deserve to be loved, for ourselves first. And I didn't do that. Very young, I didn't do that. I didn't even know that that was a thing until I started doing some healing on my own.
And the more that she worked on herself, she began to feel mixed matched with Chris.
Some people can grow through that, if they're on the same page. But sometimes, you just kind of, when you start doing that healing and you start doing that work, you kind of mismatch, if you're both not growing. You don't have to be growing at the same rate, but you both have to be growing and wanting to evolve and change.
It's almost like her saying, if I knew that this was going to be the woman that I became today, this woman would have never been with Chris. And I kind of think that's unfair to say, because sometimes a man will meet you right where you're at.
Sometimes you end up growing apart. And that's pretty much been the case for me. I look forward to being in a beautiful relationship one day with someone that knows how to love me properly, because now I know how to love myself properly, and I know that's what I will attract, you know?
But I will say, for my single folks that's out there, marriage will not teach you self-love. Self-love is what teaches you how to build a healthy marriage, because you have to realize that you're bringing your individual self to the table. And so a lot of the work should be done ahead of time, but I understand that's not always the case. So it is good if you have, you know, a counselor, a therapist, or a pastor, or somebody, honey, that you can talk to on the side. They can be your sounding board, and they can listen to you and give you great sound advice. So y'all, those are my thoughts. Those are my 2 cents on everything. But my question is, what do you think about this deep revelation that Monique revealed, where she said marrying young may have been one of her biggest mistakes? Again, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.